May 28, 1905. The waters of the Tsushima Strait churn violently, littered with debris and bodies. Admiral Togo Heihachiro stands on the bridge of his battle-scarred flagship Mikasa, watching as Japanese flags slowly rise above 5 surrendering Russian warships. In a single decisive battle, Japan has annihilated the Russian Baltic Fleet, destroying 8 battleships and capturing 5 more. Russia has lost nearly its entire navy, 126,000 tons of shipping to Japan's mere 450. The world watches in shock as an Asian nation defeats a European power for the first time in modern history. Yet just 40 years earlier, Japan was a closed feudal society without railways, factories, or a modern military. Its people had never tasted beef, worn Western clothing, or seen a foreigner. How did this isolated nation transform so rapidly into a formidable world power? This is the story of one of history's most remarkable national transformations, a revolution so profound it forever altered the global balance of power. 4 massive black ships appear on the horizon of Edo Bay, belching smoke that darkens the sky. The local fishermen call them the Black Ships of Evil. They are Commodore Matthew Perry's American steam frigates, forcing Japan to confront a world it had deliberately shut out for over 2 centuries. For 250 years, Japan had maintained a policy of sakoku, closed country. Foreign contact was limited to a single Dutch trading post on a tiny artificial island in Nagasaki Harbor. Most Japanese had never seen a foreigner, and leaving Japan was punishable by death. Japan's ruling Tokugawa shogunate faced an impossible choice: resist and face destruction like China in the Opium Wars, or open the country and risk domestic upheaval. They chose the latter, signing unequal treaties that granted Westerners extraterritoriality and control over Japanese tariffs. One observer remarked, "It was somewhat like a deaf and blind man suddenly hearing sounds and seeing colors for the first time." The initial treaty with Perry in 1854, known as the Convention of Kanagawa, opened 2 ports to American ships. Within 5 years, similar treaties were signed with Britain, Russia, France, and the Netherlands. Japanese ports became crowded with foreign ships and merchants, bringing with them not just goods, but ideas that would forever alter the course of Japanese history. The treaties sparked an immediate crisis. Inflation soared, as Japan was suddenly plugged into the global economy. Foreign goods flooded in and Japanese silver flowed out. Anti-foreigner sentiment erupted in violence as samurai attacked Western diplomats with the battle cry, "Revere the Emperor, expel the barbarians." In the autumn of 1867, a peculiar phenomenon swept across Japan. Paper prayer talismans began falling mysteriously from the sky in villages and towns. People took to the streets in ecstatic celebration, cross-dressing, drinking, and dancing to a refrain of "Ijanai-ka?" What the hell? Why not? It was as if the entire nation sensed that revolutionary change was imminent. Their instincts were correct. By January 1868, civil war erupted when forces from the southwestern domains of Satsuma and Choshu, armed with modern Western weapons, rose against the shogunate in the name of restoring the emperor to power. At the Battle of Fushimi, 15,000 shogunal troops, armed primarily with spears, charged against 5,000 imperial forces, equipped with howitzers and Gatling guns. When the imperial forces raised a banner bearing the imperial chrysanthemum, the shogun's forces refused to fire on the emperor's symbol and retreated. The conflict culminated in June 1869 at Hakodate, Hokkaido, where the last shogunal general, Hijikata Toshizo, made his final stand alongside French military advisors. Before charging to his death, he composed a death poem. "Though my body may decay on the island of Ezo, my spirit guards my lord in the east." Japan would never be the same again. The victorious imperial forces moved quickly to consolidate power. On April 6, 1868, the young Emperor Meiji issued the Charter Oath, proclaiming, "Evil customs of the past shall be broken off, and everything based upon the just laws of nature." The oath promised that knowledge shall be sought throughout the world, signaling Japan's radical new openness to foreign ideas. The feudal system was dismantled piece by piece. The 260 domains were abolished and replaced with prefectures. The 4-tiered class structure of samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants was officially eliminated. In their place came new institutions modeled on Western examples, but adapted to Japanese traditions and values. The new Meiji government faced enormous challenges. Japan remained bound by unequal treaties and lacked modern infrastructure, industry, and military power. In 1871, they launched one of history's most ambitious diplomatic missions, the Iwakura Embassy. For 2 years, Japan's leaders traveled across America and Europe, studying everything from postal systems to prisons, factories to parliaments. They sent hundreds of students abroad, including Japan's first female exchange students. One girl, Ume Tsuda, just 6 years old, would later become a pioneer of women's education in Japan. The scale of the Iwakura mission was unprecedented. Led by Prince Iwakura Tomomi, half the Japanese government traveled abroad, visiting 12 countries over 22 months. In America, they met President Grant and visited factories, schools, and banks. In Britain, they toured shipyards and steel mills. In France, they studied legal codes and military organization. In Germany, they examined educational systems and government structures. Upon their return, the leaders implemented an astonishing program of modernization. Emperor Meiji proclaimed, "Knowledge shall be sought throughout the world so as to strengthen the foundation of imperial rule." They established Western-style schools, banks, railways, factories, newspapers, and legal codes. They created a modern conscript army and navy. Foreign experts were hired at enormous expense while Japanese students studied overseas. When asked which Western model to follow, the leaders replied pragmatically, "We shall take the best from around the world and make it our own." French legal codes, British naval organization, German military structure, American industrial techniques, all were adopted and adapted to Japanese conditions. This wasn't mere imitation, but selective adoption, giving rise to the slogan, Wakon Yosai, Japanese spirit, Western learning. The transformation wasn't just institutional, it was profoundly cultural. In 1872, Emperor Meiji publicly consumed beef, breaking a 1,000-year Buddhist taboo against meat eating. Fukuzawa Yukichi, a leading intellectual, proclaimed, "People who blindly dislike meat eating according to customs our nation has followed for centuries demonstrate ignorance about the natural disposition of human beings." Western clothing replaced traditional garb. Samurai were forbidden from carrying swords in public. The centuries-old practice of blackening teeth was abandoned. Mixed-sex bathing, once commonplace, was discouraged as uncivilized. Even the concept of time changed. Japan adopted the Western calendar and 24-hour clock. People now celebrated birthdays, once considered unimportant, and urban dwellers began to organize their days around clock time rather than natural rhythms. The physical landscape transformed as rapidly as the cultural one. The first railway line opened in 1872, connecting Tokyo to Yokohama. By 1900, Japan had over 2,000 miles of railway. Telegraph lines spread across the country. Gas street lighting appeared in Tokyo. The first steel bridge spanned the Sumida River. Brick buildings rose where wooden structures had stood for centuries. Western music entered the education curriculum. Baseball became popular, introduced by American teachers. The government even tried to eliminate the Japanese language and adopt English, though this proved too radical a step. Instead, written Japanese was simplified, and thousands of new words were created to express concepts for which no Japanese equivalent existed. Not everyone embraced these changes. In 1877, Saigo Takamori, one of the heroes of the Restoration, led the Satsuma Rebellion against the government's reforms. 25,000 traditional samurai armed with swords faced the new conscript army equipped with modern weapons. After 8 months of bitter fighting, Saigo and his remaining followers committed ritual suicide rather than surrender. The rebellion's defeat marked the definitive end of the samurai era. Peasant conscripts had defeated Japan's warrior elite. Modernity had triumphed over tradition. Central to Japan's transformation was creating modern armed forces. As German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck advised Japanese leaders, "Small countries such as Japan should rely on their own efforts, not on international law, to maintain their independence against imperialist powers. In 1872, Japan introduced universal male conscription. German military advisors trained the army, while British naval instructors built the fleet. Jacob Meckel, a Prussian officer sent by Helmuth von Moltke, completely reorganized the Japanese army along German lines, from tactics to logistics to medical services. The Navy began with 3 British-built warships in 1878, sailed to Japan by British crews because Japanese sailors were deemed insufficiently trained. By 1900, Japan was constructing warships in British shipyards that British naval officers admitted were superior to their own designs. The military transformation was not merely technical, but psychological. Soldiers were instilled with a fierce sense of loyalty to the emperor and nation. The ancient samurai code of Bushido was reimagined and applied to the modern military, creating a hybrid warrior ethos that combined traditional Japanese values with modern military discipline. This new military spirit was captured in the imperial rescript to soldiers and sailors of 1882, which declared, "The soldier and sailor should consider loyalty their essential duty." The results were dramatic. In 1894–95, Japan defeated China in the First Sino-Japanese War, shocking observers who had expected the much larger Chinese forces to prevail. The victory brought Taiwan under Japanese control and established Japan as the dominant power in Korea. Then came the ultimate test, war with Russia in 1904–05. When Admiral Togo's fleet annihilated the Russian Baltic Fleet at Tsushima, even Theodore Roosevelt was stunned, calling it the greatest phenomenon the world has ever seen. By the turn of the century, Japan had achieved what many had thought impossible. In 1902, Britain, the world's preeminent power, signed the Anglo-Japanese alliance, recognizing Japan as an equal partner. It was the first alliance between a Western power and a non-Western nation in modern times. When the unequal treaties were finally revised in 1894, Japan gained full control over its tariffs and legal system. Japanese products, particularly silk textiles, dominated global markets. A country that had started with virtually no industrial base now exported locomotives and manufactured goods. Japan's industrial growth was equally remarkable. The government established model factories, then sold them to private entrepreneurs at favorable terms. The Zaibatsu, large industrial conglomerates like Mitsubishi and Mitsui, emerged as economic powerhouses. Between 1880 and 1900, Japan's industrial production increased tenfold, with cotton spinning, silk reeling, and shipbuilding leading the way. The transformation came at a cost. Rural rebellions erupted as peasants resisted new land taxes payable in cash rather than rice. The blood tax of conscription sparked riots. Many traditional crafts and cultural practices disappeared. Factory workers endured harsh conditions, working 14-hour days in dangerous environments. Women and children formed the majority of the textile workforce, laboring under conditions that shocked even Western observers accustomed to industrial exploitation. Yet Japan had succeeded where other non-Western nations had failed. It had modernized without being colonized. As Maki Ito Hirobumi, Japan's first prime minister, stood before 1,000 guests at London's Grafton Gallery during Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897, he reflected on how far Japan had come. From an interpreter for the Iwakura embassy to representing a nation now recognized as a world power, his personal journey mirrored Japan's rise. Japan's dramatic victory over Russia in 1905 had consequences no one could have foreseen. In Russia, the humiliating defeat catalyzed the 1905 revolution, a precursor to the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. In Asia, it inspired anti-colonial nationalists from India to Vietnam, proving that Western powers weren't invincible. The poet Rabindranath Tagore of India wrote, "The victory of Japan over Russia has broken the spell of European invincibility over Asiatic minds." China sent thousands of students to study in Japan, seeking to emulate its successful transformation. Leaders across the colonized world took heart that resistance to Western domination was possible. But victory also planted seeds of hubris. As one Japanese intellectual noted, "If we beat Russia, we expand to the continent and bring peace to Asia, a peace that meant Japanese dominance. In the West, Japan's rise sparked alarm. Kaiser Wilhelm II coined the term Yellow Peril, and anti-Japanese sentiment grew in America. Japan had ceased to be a quaint, exotic curiosity and become something more threatening, a non-white, non-Christian power demanding equal treatment. As Admiral Togo surveyed the aftermath of his victory at Tsushima, he ordered lifeboats launched to rescue drowning Russian sailors. The rescued men, many just boys, huddled on deck wrapped in blankets, sipping hot tea as their comrades and ships continued to slip beneath the waves. This moment of victory and humanity marked the end of Japan's impossible journey from isolation to world power, a transformation accomplished in just 40 years. But it also marked the beginning of another journey, one that would shape the tumultuous century to come. Japan had risen. The question now was, how would the world respond to this new power in the East? And how would Japan wield its newfound strength? The answer would reshape the future of Asia and the world in ways no one in 1905 could possibly imagine. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. Your support means a lot.